Can 4 containers really grow 15 food crops without turning into an overcrowded mess? They can, but only if you stop thinking of each pot as a permanent home for one crop. These 4 containers are going to work more like a tiny rotating food system. One will focus on salad greens, one on root crops, one on Asian greens, and one on herbs. Some plants will stay for weeks and keep giving you leaves. Others will mature. Leave the container and make room for the next crop. That timing is the real secret. At first, 4 empty pots on a patio may not look like much. They may even look too small for the 15 seed packets sitting beside them. Leaf lettuce, spinach, arugula, baby kale, radishes, baby beets, turnips, baby carrots, bok choy, tatsoi, Swiss chard, green onions, parsley, cilantro, and chives all need light, moisture, root space, and room for their leaves. If you try to force every one of them into the soil on the same day, the result will not be a productive garden. It will be a competition that the fastest plants win and the slower plants lose. So, this plan does not depend on tighter spacing. It depends on better timing. Every container gets one clear job. Every crop gets a reason for being there. And, most important, every crop gets an exit plan. A radish may leave early and open space. A leaf lettuce plant may stay longer while you remove only the outer leaves. A Swiss chard plant may become the anchor of its pot after bok choy has been harvested. Chives may remain in one corner while cilantro comes and goes as temperatures change. By the end of this garden cycle, you will not have 15 mature crops standing shoulder to shoulder on the same afternoon. You will have something much more useful. 4 containers with plants at different stages. Something ready to harvest, something still building roots, and something newly planted in a space that has just been released. That is how a small garden keeps producing without pretending that space has no limits. And one of these 4 containers will need a completely different strategy, because the space that looks empty above the soil may already be crowded underneath it. Before choosing the first crop, we need to give every container a clear job. The simplest way to understand this garden is to stop seeing 4 identical pots. They may be similar in size and color, but they should not be managed as if they have the same purpose. The first container is your salad pot. It will hold leaf lettuce, spinach, arugula, and baby kale, with the emphasis on tender leaves and repeated small harvests. The second is your root pot, where radishes, baby beets, turnips, and baby carrots use the soil below the surface in very different ways. The third is the Asian greens pot, built around bok choy, tatsoi, and Swiss chard. The fourth is the herb pot, where green onions, parsley, cilantro, and chives must share space even though they do not share the same growth rhythm. This is not simply a list divided into 4 groups. It is a rotation menu. Some crops can overlap for a while. Some should be planted in separate strips. Some should not enter the container until another crop has been removed. That distinction is what protects the roots, the light, and the airflow. There are 3 ideas that make the whole system work. The first is interplanting. That means growing compatible crops together when their shapes, root habits, or harvest schedules allow them to share the container without serious competition. Green onions along an edge may leave the center available for parsley. A few radishes may occupy a harvestable strip, while carrots develop in a less disturbed section. Interplanting is not the same as filling every visible gap. It works only when you understand how large the plants will become and how long they will stay. The second idea is staggered sowing. Instead of covering an entire container with seed on one day, you sow a smaller section, then another section later. That can prevent one overwhelming harvest and help keep young plants coming behind older ones. It also gives you room to correct mistakes. If the first strip of arugula comes up too thick, you can thin it before repeating the same pattern. If the weather is too warm for spinach, you have not committed the whole pot. The third idea is succession planting. This is what turns 4 containers into a garden that can produce more than one moment of abundance. A crop is harvested, the newly opened area is checked, the surface is refreshed if needed, and another crop takes its place. The next planting does not have to be the same species. In fact, the most useful succession often changes the type of crop. Fast radishes can leave before slower roots need more room. A harvested bok choy can open light around Swiss chard. A short run of cilantro can give way to another small sowing when conditions improve. Notice that none of these methods asks you to ignore mature plant size. A seedling can make a container look empty, but it is borrowing space from its future self. A baby kale plant that fits between two lettuces today may become the plant that blocks both of them later. A small tatsoi rosette can eventually spread low and wide. A parsley seedling may be slow at first, then remain in the pot long after a quick crop has come and gone. That is why every planting decision should answer two questions. What job will this crop perform now? And what must happen before the next crop can use this space? When both answers are clear, the garden stays organized. When only the first answer is clear, the container slowly becomes crowded. The salad pot will give quick leaves. The root pot will teach patience below the soil. The Asian greens pot will show how leaf shape changes spacing. The herb pot will reveal why plants that look small can still be difficult to schedule. Together, they give you variety, without requiring 15 separate containers. The 4 recipes sound simple, but treating every container the same would quietly ruin the entire plan. The next decisions, container depth, drainage, soil volume, light, and water, will determine which of these crops can actually succeed. Start with drainage. Every container needs open drainage holes that allow excess water to leave. A pot without reliable drainage can stay saturated after heavy watering or rain, and roots that need both moisture and oxygen can struggle in that condition. A pot that drains well does not mean the soil should dry immediately. It means water can move through the mix instead of collecting around the roots. Do not solve drainage by filling the bottom with a thick layer of rocks. What matters more is an appropriate container mix and unobstructed holes. Use a light, loose-growing medium intended for containers, with enough structure to hold moisture, but enough airspace to avoid becoming a dense block. Heavy garden soil, used by itself, can compact inside a pot, drain unevenly, and make root crops especially difficult. The goal is a mix you can moisten evenly and gently press into place without packing it hard. The root container deserves the greatest attention to depth. Baby carrots are smaller than many full-size carrots, but they still need a useful vertical zone of loose soil. Turnips and beets form swollen roots that also need room and even moisture. Radishes may be quicker and more compact, but they should not be used as proof that every root crop can live in a shallow bowl. Choose the deepest of your 4 suitable containers for this group. If all 4 pots are identical and relatively shallow, change the crop plan rather than forcing carrots into inadequate soil. The other 3 containers need generous surface area because leaves and stems spread above the soil. A very narrow pot may hold enough mix for 1 plant, yet provide little usable space for a 4-crop recipe. Broad containers make it easier to create strips, corners, and temporary openings. They also make selective harvesting less disruptive because your hand can reach 1 plant without crushing another. Fill the containers nearly to the working level, leaving a modest space below the rim so water does not wash soil over the edge. Moisten dry mix before sowing. Extremely dry potting mix can repel water at first, allowing it to run around the edges while the center remains dry. Add water gradually and mix until the medium feels evenly damp rather than soaked. Then level the surface gently. A smooth seedbed helps small seeds stay at a more consistent depth. Next, consider light. Place the containers in the brightest practical location on the patio, especially as days become shorter or neighboring structures cast longer shadows. Leafy vegetables tolerate less intense light than many fruiting crops, but tolerance is not the same as thriving in deep shade. Weak light can produce stretched seedlings, thin leaves, slower drying, and reduced growth. Observe the space over several hours, instead of assuming a bright-looking patio receives enough direct sun. As larger leaves develop, check whether one container is casting shade onto another. A beautiful Swiss chard plant can become an unexpected wall for a lower tatsoi pot if the arrangement is too tight. Watering should be based on the condition of each container, not on a single calendar. The salad pot may lose moisture quickly when it is covered with tender leaves. The deeper root pot may stay moist farther below the surface, even when the top looks dry. The herb pot may contain a dense parsley plant beside a newly sown patch of cilantro, creating two different moisture needs in the same container. Touch the surface, check slightly below it, notice the weight of the pot when practical, and observe the plants. Newly sown seed needs dependable moisture near the surface. A deep soaking followed by several days of a crusted, dry top layer may not help a shallow seed. Use a gentle stream or watering rows so the seed is not washed into piles. Once plants are established, water thoroughly enough to moisten the root zone, then allow the mix to move toward a healthy level of aeration before watering again. Avoid keeping every pot constantly saturated just because seedlings look delicate. Temperature changes the watering rhythm. Wind can dry containers quickly. A dark pot in direct sun can warm faster than the surrounding ground. Cool, cloudy weather can slow water use. This is why a fixed instruction such as watering every morning cannot be correct for every patio in the United States. The useful habit is checking, not guessing. Good container mix begins with nutrients, but these 4 pots will be asked to support more than one planting. After a crop is removed, inspect the open section. If the level has settled, add a small amount of fresh mix or finished compost at the surface. Work only the free area and avoid tearing through the roots of plants that remain. Repeated harvests remove nutrients, so ongoing fertility may be needed, but more fertilizer is not a substitute for space, light, or healthy roots. Be especially careful with the root pot. Excessive nitrogen can encourage a great deal of leafy growth without guaranteeing good roots. Feed according to the needs of container vegetables and the product directions you use, rather than assuming that stronger feeding always creates a larger harvest. The visual size of the leaves is only one part of the plant. Finally, plan access. Leave enough room around the pots to thin seedlings, remove a mature radish, cut outer leaves, and sow into an opening without stepping over other containers. Place the root pot where you can work from above without pulling sideways through neighboring foliage. With drainage, depth, light, moisture, and access established, the 4 recipes can begin. The salad pot will probably be the first container to look full, but that visual success can become its biggest weakness. So let us build the first recipe without turning a lush salad container into a crowded mat of weak seedlings. Think of the salad container as a series of harvest zones rather than one bowl of mixed seed. It is tempting to scatter lettuce, spinach, arugula, and kale across the whole surface because the seedlings look attractive together. The problem appears later. Arugula can rise quickly. Lettuce can spread outward. Spinach may grow more slowly in warm conditions, and baby kale can become much larger than the name suggests if you leave it in place. When every seed begins everywhere, there is no clear place to thin, harvest, or replant. Divide the surface into visible sections. They do not need to be perfectly measured, but they should be easy to recognize. One strip can hold leaf lettuce. Another smaller strip can hold arugula. Give spinach a section where it will not be buried by faster leaves. Reserve a corner for baby kale, or wait to sow the kale until the first quick crop has been thinned. This simple organization makes every later decision easier. Leaf lettuce is the flexible foundation of the pot. Choose loose leaf types, rather than expecting several large heads to mature shoulder to shoulder. Sow lightly, then thin the seedlings before their leaves form a dense carpet. Those thinnings can be useful as young greens when they are healthy and clean, but the more important benefit is the room they create. A smaller number of well-spaced lettuce plants can produce better leaves than a thick mass competing for light and moisture. When the lettuce is established, harvest the outer leaves first. Take a few clean leaves from several plants, instead of stripping one plant completely. Leave the central growing point intact. This does not make lettuce produce forever, and heat or age will eventually reduce quality, but it can extend the useful period of the planting. Watch the center. If the plant begins stretching upward, the flavor becomes stronger, or the leaves lose tenderness, do not keep it only because the pot looks full. That plant may have completed its role. Arugula provides speed and a sharper flavor. A narrow sowing can give you tender leaves, while the slower sections develop. Because arugula can become crowded quickly, thin it early, and harvest it while the leaves are still at the stage you prefer. If the weather pushes it toward flowering, removing the entire strip may be more useful than trying to preserve every plant. That cleared strip becomes one of the first succession spaces in the 4-pot garden. Spinach needs more patience and, in many regions, cooler conditions. Do not judge it by the pace of arugula. If days are still hot, spinach may germinate unevenly or move quickly toward poor quality growth. In that case, keep the spinach section available, but delay sowing until conditions are more suitable. The rotation plan is allowed to respond to weather. A fixed calendar is less valuable than observing the temperature and the plants. Once spinach is growing, protect it from being overshadowed. A large lettuce leaf can lie across a young spinach plant and keep the center damp and dim. Remove old or damaged leaves, thin crowded neighbors, and rotate the pot if one side consistently leans toward the light. Harvest outer spinach leaves when they are large enough to use, but keep enough healthy foliage for the plant to continue growing. Baby kale is the long-term option in this container. It can be harvested young, but it can also remain after quick arugula or lettuce sections have been cleared. That flexibility makes it useful, yet it can also create the biggest spacing mistake. If you sow many kale seedlings at baby leaf density and then decide to keep all of them, the pot will become crowded. Decide early which plants are temporary greens and which one or two may stay longer. Thin the rest while they are still easy to remove. The first major conflict arrives when the pot looks most successful. Leaves touch, overlap, and hide the soil. The container appears abundant, but airflow decreases and small plants disappear beneath larger ones. Moisture can remain trapped around the base, even while exposed leaves wilt in afternoon sun. This is the moment to harvest more, not to congratulate the pot and leave it untouched. Begin by removing leaves that are yellowing, damaged, or lying against the soil. Then take usable outer leaves. If one strip has reached the harvest stage, clear part or all of it. Keep the strongest plants that match your longer plan. The goal is not a perfectly full photograph. The goal is a pot that can keep producing healthy leaves. After an arugula strip or a group of lettuce plants is removed, inspect the opening. Do not immediately push seed into the first visible patch. Check whether neighboring roots occupy the area. If the soil surface is compacted, loosen only the top layer with your fingers or a small tool. Add a thin layer of fresh container mix if the level has dropped. Water gently, then sow the next small strip. The next crop can be another round of lettuce or arugula when conditions remain favorable. It can also be delayed spinach when temperatures cool. Baby kale can move from a supporting role to the main crop as other greens leave. This is why the salad pot does not need all 4 species at full size on the same day. Its productivity comes from a sequence of tender harvests. If arugula becomes too strong in warm conditions, shift to a different green. If lettuce stays tender and productive, sow another small patch rather than replacing the entire container. Staggering keeps you from having every plant become old at once. Watering changes as the canopy changes. A newly cleared strip has exposed soil that may dry differently from the shaded root zone beneath mature lettuce. Direct water toward the soil rather than repeatedly wetting all the leaves. Check the young sowing more often because its roots are shallow, but avoid drowning the established plants beside it. One container can contain several stages, and those stages require observation. The salad pot teaches the central lesson of this garden very quickly. A harvest is not a loss of beauty, it is a management tool. Each leaf you cut can improve airflow. Each plant you remove can release light. Each cleared strip can become the beginning of the next crop. When the container temporarily looks less full, it may actually be becoming more productive. At its best, this pot contains a few established plants, a section ready to harvest, and a small area beginning again. Leaf lettuce supplies repeated outer leaves. Arugula gives an early, fast harvest. Spinach enters when the weather supports it. Baby kale can remain as a stronger anchor after quick crops leave. 4 greens pass through one container without being forced to compete at full size. The salad container uses space mostly above the soil, but the next pot is governed by what you cannot see beneath it. An empty patch of surface does not always mean an empty root zone, and that makes the root container far less forgiving. The root container asks you to plan in 3 dimensions. Leaves may look small above the soil, while roots are already claiming the space below. That hidden competition is why radishes, baby carrots, baby beets, and turnips should not simply be scattered together. Give the deepest, suitable pot to this group. Fill it with loose mix and protect the sections that need the longest undisturbed growth. Begin with the carrots. They are often the slowest part of this recipe and the least tolerant of repeated disturbance. Create a clearly marked strip or central zone for baby carrots. Sow thinly, cover at the depth recommended for the seed, and keep the surface evenly moist while germination occurs. Small seeds are easy to oversow, but crowded seedlings do not solve themselves. Thin them before the roots begin pressing against one another. It is better to keep fewer well-positioned plants than to preserve every seedling and harvest a mass of thin, twisted roots. Do not pull neighboring plants carelessly once carrots are established. Their young roots can be displaced when soil is lifted nearby. If you place faster crops beside them, make those crops easy to remove from the edge or from a separate strip. The layout should allow a mature radish to leave without dragging across the carrot zone. Radishes are the fast-opening crop in this pot. They can occupy a row near the rim or a clearly separated section. They grow quickly enough to give the container an early payoff, and when they are harvested, they release surface area and reduce competition. But radishes still need thinning. A dense cluster may produce leaves without forming useful roots. Remove extras while they are small, and watch the shoulders of the remaining plants rather than relying only on a calendar. Harvest radishes when they reach the usable size for the variety, and before they become overly pithy or woody. Grip close to the base and lift steadily so nearby soil is disturbed as little as possible. If the mix is dry and hard, moisten it first. After the radishes are gone, resist the urge to immediately fill every hole. Check how far the carrot roots or other established plants have spread. The newly visible soil may not be entirely available below. Baby beets add another layer of value, because both leaves and roots can be useful, but they still require real spacing. A beet seed cluster can produce more than one seedling, so thinning may be necessary even when you sow carefully. Keep a small number in their own section rather than weaving them through every gap. Young beet leaves can be harvested sparingly, but do not remove so much foliage that the root cannot continue building energy. Turnips can be managed in a similar way, with a decision made in advance. Are you growing them primarily for tender greens, for small roots, or for both? A dense sowing intended for greens cannot all remain for root production. Thin or harvest enough plants to create the final spacing you need. Turnip leaves can become broad and can shade the soil, so place them where they will not cover the carrot strip. The safest rotation is not to start all 4 root crops at maximum density. Establish the long-term carrot area first. Add a manageable radish strip for an early harvest, then use a separate section for either baby beets or turnips, bringing the 4th crop in after the first opening appears. This preserves the promise of 4 root crops, while respecting the volume of the container. Moisture consistency matters here. Repeated cycles of severe dryness and heavy soaking can stress roots and lead to uneven growth. Water slowly enough for the mix to absorb moisture throughout the pot. Then check before watering again. The top may dry while the deeper zone remains moist. A finger test near the surface, the weight of the pot, and the condition of the leaves together give a better picture than one sign alone. Avoid feeding the root pot as if the goal were the largest possible canopy. Too much nitrogen can encourage lush leaves without improving the roots underneath. Use a balanced approach and follow the instructions of the amendment or fertilizer you choose. Good light, loose soil, steady moisture, and proper thinning usually matter more than forcing growth with extra feeding. As the pot develops, pay attention to the difference between a visible opening and a functional opening. A radish may leave a small hole, but carrot roots could run nearby. A beet may be removed and create a larger pocket that is safer to reuse. Work only the free section. Loosen the surface gently. Replace settled mix. And avoid digging across the whole container while other roots remain. The first succession after radishes may be another short row of radishes, if the weather still suits them. It may be a small group of turnips or beets, if the released area is large enough. It may also be better to leave the opening unplanted for a short time, so the slower roots can expand. Productive gardening does not require every square inch to hold a new seed at every moment. Sometimes the most productive decision is to protect the crop already in progress. When beet or turnip leaves begin overlapping heavily, harvest selected outer greens or remove the plant that has reached your desired stage. Do not keep an oversized plant simply because it is healthy. In a 4-container system, a crop completes its job when its harvest is useful and its removal improves the next stage. By the time the first radishes have left, the container behaves differently. Carrots receive more light at the soil surface. Air moves more freely. Beets or turnips have room to expand. A small opening can accept the next sowing only when the root zone truly allows it. The pot may look less dramatic than the salad container, but much of its work is happening where the camera cannot see. This container teaches patience and restraint. Thin early. Disturb as little as possible. Harvest fast crops cleanly. Do not mistake leaf growth for root success, and never assume bare soil is unused soil. If you follow those rules, radishes can provide the early reward while carrots, beets, and turnips take their turns through the deeper space. The next container reverses the problem. Its roots may fit, but its leaves can quickly occupy far more room than expected. That is exactly what makes bok choy, tatsoi, and Swiss chard such a useful, but potentially crowded, combination. The Asian greens container is built around leaf shape and harvest style. Bok choy grows upward and outward. Tatsoi forms a lower rosette that can spread across the soil, and Swiss chard can become a taller, longer-lasting plant. All three are productive in containers, but they should not be planted at baby leaf spacing and then expected to mature together without conflict. Choose which crop will be the anchor. In this plan, Swiss chard is the best candidate to remain after the quicker crops leave. Give 1 or 2 chard plants a position where they can expand without blocking the whole pot. They may look small at first, but their leaf stalks and blades can eventually occupy substantial space. If you place them in the center, keep the surrounding crops temporary. If you place them toward the back of the pot, make sure that side receives enough light. Bok choy offers 2 useful strategies. You can grow a smaller number for fuller heads, or plant more closely with the intention of harvesting them young. The mistake is combining both strategies accidentally. If you sow densely, then hesitate to remove any plants. The leaves will press together and the centers will stay shaded. Decide early which bok choy plants are temporary and which ones will receive the final spacing. Place bok choy in a section that can be reached easily. When a plant is harvested whole, you should be able to cut or lift it without crushing the chard beside it. A row near the front edge works well in many containers. As those plants leave, the chard behind them receives more light and airflow. Tatsoi behaves differently. Its rosette stays low, but it can spread wider than a new gardener expects. Several small tatsoi plants may appear to fit neatly around chard. Then cover the surface as their leaves flatten outward. Give them a defined zone, and harvest some young if the rosettes begin touching. You can take outer leaves selectively, but if the spacing is tight, removing an entire plant may create a more useful opening. These greens are often associated with cool season growing, so temperature must guide the schedule. In a hot patio, sowing all 3 at once may lead to stress, rapid flowering, or poor texture. In a mild or cooling period, they may develop more steadily. The exact timing varies across the United States, which is why the plan should respond to local conditions instead of following one national date. Watch the leaves for the first signs of competition. When bok choy leaves lean into one another, tatsoi disappears under taller foliage, or Swiss chard begins shading the front of the pot. Take action. Harvesting is the first tool. Thinning is the second. Repositioning the container for better light may help, but it cannot correct a density problem by itself. Remove damaged leaves that rest on the soil. Keep the base of the plants open enough for air to move. Water at the soil level when possible, especially once the canopy becomes dense. A wet mass of overlapping leaves can create problems even when the roots need moisture. The goal is not to keep every leaf. It is to keep the plants healthy and useful. Swiss chard rewards selective harvesting. Take the oldest outer leaves first, cutting them cleanly near the base while protecting the central growth. Leave enough foliage for continued growth. As bok choy or tatsoi is harvested, chard can expand into the released light. This change in roles is the mini transformation of the container. The pot begins as a mixed planting and gradually becomes a chard-centered system, with new young greens entering around it. Bok choy can create the largest single opening. Once a head reaches the stage you want, harvest it, rather than leaving it to occupy space beyond its best quality. After removal, inspect the soil. If nearby roots do not fill the gap, smooth and refresh the surface, then sow a small follow-up patch. That patch might be another bok choy sowing, young tatsoi, or a different green from the approved rotation when conditions suit it. Tatsoi can create smaller, more frequent openings. Harvesting alternate plants is often more useful than trimming every rosette equally. The remaining plants then receive room to widen. That pattern can turn a crowded start into a well-spaced middle stage. Do not feed heavily in response to pale, shaded growth before checking the spacing and light. A plant hidden beneath larger leaves may not need more fertilizer. It may need exposure. Likewise, a chard plant with large foliage may need harvest, not additional encouragement. In a limited container, growth must be managed, not merely accelerated. This pot also shows why plant height is only part of spacing. Tatsoi can stay low and still dominate the surface. Bok choy can look compact from above until its outer leaves open. Chard can rise above both and cast shade. Plan for the mature footprint. Then use the harvest schedule to prevent all three footprints from reaching maximum size at the same time. At the most productive stage, 1 or 2 Swiss chard plants remain as anchors. A few bok choy or tatsoi plants are approaching harvest. A newly opened section holds younger plants. The container includes several ages, but not uncontrolled density. Each plant has light, access, and a clear role. When one crop leaves, do not view the empty space as a failure. The opening proves that the system is moving. The chard gains room. A new sowing gains a starting point. The container changes without becoming idle. The final container looks easier because herbs stay relatively small, but their different lifespans make it the hardest pot to schedule correctly. The challenge is not fitting green onions, parsley, cilantro, and chives into one pot. It is deciding which ones should still be there when the others are ready to leave. Begin the herb container by separating permanent space from flexible space. Chives and parsley are likely to occupy their positions longer. Cilantro and green onions can move through the container in shorter cycles, depending on how you harvest them and how the weather behaves. If you mix all 4 evenly across the surface, you lose the ability to remove one crop without disturbing the others. Place chives in a corner or at one end. A young clump looks modest, but it can widen over time. Keeping it away from the center prevents it from dividing the entire pot. Harvest by cutting a portion of the leaves above the base, leaving enough healthy growth for the clump to recover. Do not repeatedly cut every leaf to the soil and expect unlimited regrowth. Give the plant time, light, moisture, and nutrients between harvests. Parsley deserves its own zone because it often starts slowly and then remains useful for a long period. Sow or transplant it where faster cilantro will not cover it. Once established, take outer stems and leave the central growth. A mature parsley plant can become a strong anchor, much like Swiss chard in the previous container. That makes its position important. If it sits in the middle, plan the surrounding herbs as temporary crops. Green onions are useful along an edge. Their upright leaves occupy less horizontal space than a broad parsley plant, and an edge row is easy to reach. You can harvest selected leaves from established plants or remove whole onions when they reach the stage you want. Whole plant harvest creates clear openings. Selective cutting extends the planting, but does not remove root competition. so decide which result the container needs. Cilantro is the most weather-sensitive part of this recipe. In cool, favorable conditions, it can provide fresh leaves. In heat, it may move rapidly toward flowering and seed. Instead of sowing the entire cilantro section at once, use small batches. If one batch declines, it does not take the whole pot with it. When temperatures are unsuitable, leave that flexible section for green onions, or wait for better conditions, rather than repeatedly forcing cilantro to fail. The first conflict in this pot is unequal speed. Green onions may rise quickly while parsley remains small. Cilantro can produce a useful flush, then begin stretching upward. Chives may slowly build a dense clump. If you treat all four as identical herbs, the quick crops will be kept too long, and the long-lived crops will be crowded before they establish. The second conflict is harvesting access. Herbs are planted because you want to use them often, so do not create a design that requires reaching through chives to cut parsley or stepping around the pot to reach cilantro. Keep the flexible section at the front. Leave a narrow, visible boundary between zones. That boundary may disappear as foliage expands, but it will guide your hand when you harvest. The third conflict is moisture. Newly sown cilantro needs moisture near the surface, while established parsley and chives use a deeper root zone. Water the young patch gently and check the whole pot before adding more. Do not keep the entire container saturated just to protect one small sowing. A light surface mulch can help reduce rapid drying once seedlings are established, but it should not bury new growth or keep stems constantly wet. When cilantro begins to lose leaf quality or move into flowering, decide whether you want to keep it for blossoms and seed or clear the section for food production. In a compact 4-pot system, removal is often the practical choice. Cut or lift the plants carefully, refresh the open surface, and sow another small batch when conditions improve. This cycle is expected, not a failure. When green onions are harvested whole, use those narrow openings thoughtfully. You may replant another short row or widen the neighboring cilantro zone. If you only cut the tops, remember that the roots remain. The space may look open above the soil while still being occupied below, the same lesson learned in the root pot. Parsley and chives form the stable background. They do not have to fill the container. In fact, leaving flexible soil beside them is what allows the herb pot to keep changing. A new cilantro sowing can enter. Green onions can be replaced. A tired short-term crop can leave without dismantling the whole arrangement. This is the twist of the herb container. It is easy to plant because all 4 crops appear compact, but it is difficult to schedule because they do not age together. The most successful version may never look perfectly symmetrical. One corner contains established chives. Parsley fills another zone. Green onions line an edge at several sizes. Cilantro may be lush, newly emerging, or temporarily absent because the weather is wrong. That changing appearance is a sign that the container is being used intelligently. Herbs close to the kitchen can provide frequent small harvests, but only when you avoid cutting them all the same way. Take outer parsley stems. Trim chives in portions. Harvest green onions, according to whether you need leaves or open soil. Sow cilantro in small rounds. Observe recovery before cutting again. Now all 4 containers are planted, but the system will keep producing only if you know when to remove a crop, instead of trying to preserve every plant. This is where succession planting stops being a theory and becomes the daily management of the garden. Walk past the 4 pots every day or two and look for changes, not perfection. Leaves beginning to overlap, a crop reaching the quality you want, a plant stretching toward flowering, or a shaded seedling disappearing beneath its neighbor are all signals. The right response is often harvest, thinning, or removal. Adding fertilizer or water cannot repair a container whose main problem is too many plants. When a crop completes its role, remove it cleanly. Take the edible harvest first. Lift or cut the remaining base according to the surrounding roots. If neighboring plants are close, avoid pulling a large root ball through them. Remove obvious root pieces from the free area, but do not dig through the entire pot. Healthy roots from plants that remain should stay undisturbed. Loosen only the surface of the opening. Container mix settles with watering, so add a small amount of fresh mix or finished compost when the level has dropped. Blend it gently into the available top layer. Water the section, allow it to settle, then sow or transplant the next crop at realistic spacing. The replacement plant is entering an active container, not a brand new pot, so its position must respect the roots and leaves already present. Do not replant automatically on the same afternoon. Sometimes the remaining crop needs the released room more than you need another seedling. After radishes leave, carrots may benefit from the space. After bok choy is harvested, Swiss chard may need time to expand. After an arugula strip is cleared, a nearby lettuce plant may finally receive enough light. An opening can serve the garden even when it remains temporarily unplanted. Avoid 6 common mistakes. First, do not sow the entire next packet because one small space appears. Second, do not preserve weak plants out of guilt when they are blocking healthier ones. Third, do not replace every crop with the same species without considering weather and soil condition. Fourth, do not water more heavily to compensate for root crowding. Fifth, do not disturb the whole container each time one crop leaves. And sixth, do not judge productivity only by how full the pot looks. A useful succession container often looks uneven. One section is mature, one is being harvested, and one is newly sown. That unevenness spreads the work and the harvest over time. It also gives you a chance to adapt. If the next week is hotter than expected, delay spinach or cilantro. If cooler weather arrives, use an opening for those crops. If one plant develops a problem, removing a small zone is easier than losing a pot planted as one dense mixture. Keep simple notes. Record what entered each section, which crop left first, and where crowding appeared. You do not need a complicated chart. A label and a few dates can show whether your staggered sowings were too close together or too far apart. The next cycle becomes easier because the container itself has taught you how quickly crops grow in your light and climate. Once the first openings appear, the 4 pots may look less impressive for a moment. That temporary emptiness is exactly what protects the next harvest. Space allows light to reach younger leaves, roots to expand, and air to move. The final transformation is not 15 mature crops packed into 4 pots. It is a garden with something growing, something ready to harvest, and something newly planted at the same time. Look at the 4 containers again. The salad pot is no longer a single flush of leaves. A few lettuce plants are still giving outer leaves. Baby kale has more room, and a cleared strip may hold a new sowing of arugula or spinach when conditions are right. The root pot has changed more quietly. Early radishes have left, slower carrots remain protected, and beets or turnips use the openings without being crowded into every inch. In the Asian greens pot, harvested bok choy or tatsoi has released light around Swiss chard. The chard now acts as the anchor, while a small new planting begins in a safe section. In the herb pot, parsley and chives form the stable base. Green onions occupy the edge, and cilantro moves through short, weather-dependent rounds. Each container is doing a different job, yet all 4 follow the same rhythm. Plant, observe, harvest, open the space, and plant again when the opening is truly available. They can provide fresh leaves, roots, greens, and herbs from a patio that once held 4 empty containers. They can teach you how quickly your soil dries, how much sun your space receives, which crops suit your climate, and how harvesting at the right moment creates the next opportunity. If you can begin with only one recipe, choose according to what you most want to use. Start with the salad pot for frequent tender leaves. Choose the root pot if you want to learn patience and enjoy a clear underground harvest. Use the Asian greens pot for substantial leafy crops with different shapes and harvest styles. Choose the herb pot when you want small, regular cuttings close to the kitchen. Then expand only after you understand the first container. 4 pots are enough for this system, but even one can teach the central principle. A productive small garden is not created by forcing more plants into the same moment. It is created by giving each plant enough space during the part of the season when it needs that space most. We began with 4 empty containers and 15 crops that seemed impossible to fit. The solution was never tighter spacing. It was assigning roles, planting in sections, harvesting at the right stage, and allowing crops to leave. 4 containers become a food garden not when they are packed to the edges, but when every opening has a purpose, and every harvest makes room for what comes next. Choose the container recipe you would start first, and share it in the comments. And follow the channel for more practical ways to grow food in patios, balconies, and small spaces without turning your garden into an overcrowded experiment.